Egyptian village on the banks of the Nile with as authentic an environment as possible. The village is surrounded by an extensive papyrus plantation, which not only reproduces the ancient surroundings, but also, along with the hundreds of trees which were planted around the village, provides an effective screen to isolate this glimpse of Egypt's ancient past from sights and sounds of modern life. The Pharaonic village covers an area of 32 acres, where people dressed in the clothes of ancient times perform their daily tasks in agriculture, industry, religious affairs and home life, using replicas of the tools and instruments of the ancient Egyptians. When Dr. Abdusalam Regev took over the village from his father, he expanded it with 10 special museums, covering such varied subjects as mummification, ancient boats, the Coptic and Islamic periods, and the life of President Nasser. Dr. Abdusalam has made the Pharaonic village into an open book on Egyptian history and culture. You are about to take a voyage back in time to the land of the pharaohs 4,000 years ago. Between the trees is a statue of the Roman god Nilos, the personification of the river Nile. Nilos rests his arm on a sphinx, symbol of Egypt's great antiquity, and is attended by crocodiles which were found in the Nile in ancient times. The children surrounding the god represent the new life and fertility brought to the land by the annual flood. First of all, we will enter the Canal of Mythology, where there are statues of some of the principal gods and pharaohs of ancient times. The plant growing in the water here is papyrus, which was used by the ancient Egyptians for making paper. The modern name actually comes from the name of the plant. Papyrus grew abundantly in Egypt in Pharaonic times, especially in the marshes of the delta. But it gradually disappeared after new methods of manufacturing paper were brought to this country from China in about 1000 AD. The ancient art of making paper from papyrus was lost until about 30 years ago, when Dr. Hassan Regev started this papyrus plantation and rediscovered the art after many years of research. Papyrus was also used for making boats, mats and sandals, and the lower part of the stem was sometimes eaten as a vegetable. The papyrus plant was the symbol of Lower Egypt, the northern part of the country, while the lotus flower was the symbol of Upper Egypt. As well as being prized for its perfume, the lotus symbolized resurrection to the ancient Egyptians, because the flower opens when the life-giving sun is out and closes when the sun sets. Osiris, the god of resurrection and lord of eternity, was usually shown as a mummy, his flesh colored green or black. According to the legend of Osiris, he was a king of Egypt who was foully murdered by his brother Seth, who was jealous of Osiris' popularity. Seth tore Osiris' body into 14 pieces, which he scattered throughout Egypt. Isis, Osiris' faithful wife, searched the country for the pieces of her husband's body, and then brought him back to life, after which she conceived her son Horus, who was eventually to avenge his father's murder. Isis, the sister and wife of Osiris, has her son Horus on her knee. Isis was worshipped all over Egypt as a mother goddess who typified the faithful wife and devoted mother. In the early centuries AD, the cult of Isis was taken to Europe by Roman soldiers who had served in Egypt. The most famous temple of Isis can be visited nowadays on the island of Philae at Aswan. Horus, the falcon god, in his earliest form was the god of aerial space, with the sun and moon as his two eyes. Later he was regarded as the son of Isis and Osiris, who avenged his father's death by fighting with his uncle Seth for the throne of Egypt. After many years of conflict, Horus was at last triumphant. Ammon was the god of the ancient city of Thebes, where Luxor stands today. He first came to prominence in the Middle Kingdom around 1900 BC, and during the New Kingdom from 1550 onwards became the king of the gods, because he was the god of the Theban kings who drove out the Hyksos, the Asiatic rulers who had ruled Egypt for 150 years. The largest ancient temple in the world, the Great Temple of Karnak in Luxor, was dedicated to the god Ammon. These weeping willow trees helped to create the ancient Egyptian atmosphere and screen the village from its modern surroundings. Thutmosis III was one of the greatest generals of ancient times. He succeeded to the throne of Egypt at about 8 years of age, but was supplanted by his stepmother, Queen Hatshepsut, who ruled as pharaoh for the next 22 years. During this time, Thutmosis trained in the priesthood and the army. As pharaoh, he carried out 17 military campaigns in Western Asia and extended the frontiers of the Egyptian empire to their furthest limits. Standing in the water is a Nilometer, a gauge used by the ancient Egyptians to measure the rise of the annual flood, which occurred every summer. This enabled tax assessors to estimate the revenue from the grain harvest the following spring. Even in those days, farmers complained that they did all the work and the taxman got all the profit. Akhenaten elevated the Aten, the disk of the sun, to be the state god of Egypt in a form of monotheism. At the same time, he introduced a dramatic change of art style and built a new capital city in Middle Egypt. Akhenaten's beautiful wife, Queen Nefertiti, was a keen supporter of the cult of the Aten. After Akhenaten's death, the Egyptians returned to the old form of the religion during the reign of his successor, Tutankhamun, who was probably his son. Later pharaohs tried to wipe out all traces of Akhenaten's existence. Ramesses II had one of the longest reigns in ancient Egyptian history, as he was pharaoh for 67 years. In the 5th year of his reign, he fought a great battle against the Hittites from northern Syria. The battle was indecisive, both sides claiming victory, but it is certain that Ramesses' personal courage saved the Egyptians from defeat. 16 years later, the king signed a peace treaty with the Hittite leader Hattusilis II, which was the first recorded peace treaty in world history. The most famous of Ramesses II's monuments is the great temple at Abu Simbel in Nubia, south of Aswan. This magnificent building, with its famous colossal statues of the king, was cut entirely in the rock, along with the nearby temple of Ramesses' favorite queen, Nefertari. The two temples were rescued from the waters of Lake Nasser when the Aswan High Dam was being built in the 1960s. scene shows the discovery of the child Moses, whose mother had put him in a basket and floated it on the Nile to prevent him from being killed by Pharaoh's soldiers. The child was discovered by a member of Pharaoh's family and was brought up in the royal palace. Eventually, he became a prophet who led his own people, the Hebrews, out of Egypt. The grotesque dwarf god Bes was a great favorite with the Egyptians. He was believed to protect people against snakes and scorpions, and was particularly regarded as a patron of women in childbirth. In general, Bes was the god of pleasure and enjoyment of every kind. Now life in ancient Egypt comes alive with scenes of agriculture and industry. The nobleman and his wife are enjoying the fresh air in their garden pavilion. They are playing a game called senet, a game for 2 players, a form of which is still played in Egypt today. Ploughing is the first operation in preparing the land for cultivation, and here we see the ploughman with his team and the simple wooden plough. After ploughing, the heavy clods of soil are broken up with a hoe, and then furrows are made with the broad-bladed mattock. The sower scatters the seed from a small bag or basket, and sheep follow the sower to press the seed into the tough soil with their feet. Beside the houses in the background are pigeon towers. The Egyptians kept pigeons for food, and they were used for carrying messages, especially for the army. The fields are irrigated by means of the shadoof, which works like a balance, with a bucket at one end of a long pole and a heavy stone as a counterweight. Shadoofs are still sometimes used in the Egyptian countryside. When the grain is harvested, the sheaves are carried to the threshing floor in a net bag hung on a long pole. When a thick layer of grain has been spread on the circular floor, oxen or cows are driven round to break up the ears of grain with their heavy feet. The next process is winnowing, when the grain is tossed up into the air so that the lighter chaff or husk will blow away on the wind. The grain is then taken to be stored in the silos. The scribe makes a careful record of all the grain which is being stored. This was important for taxation purposes, as there was no money in Egypt in Pharaonic times. Honey was used for sweetening by the ancient Egyptians, as sugarcane was not grown in Egypt in those days. Beehives were made of pottery tubes piled up in rows, and in some parts of the country, beehives are still made this way today. The River Nile was the main highway of communication in Pharaonic times, so boat building was an important industry. Small boats were made of bundles of papyrus tied together with ropes. Such boats were used for short journeys and for fishing or hunting trips. Larger boats were made of wood, usually cedar wood imported from Lebanon. Wooden boats were pegged together with dowels and sewn together with ropes, as can be seen in the cross-section on the bank. When the boat was put into the water, the wood expanded and the rope shrank, so the boat became completely watertight. A royal boat of this type can be seen in the museum beside the Great Pyramid of King Cheops at Giza. The palm tree was a valuable resource for the Egyptians. The trunk was used in house building, and the branches provided fronds for making mats and baskets, while furniture and boxes were made from the ribs. The boxes were used for storage and as cages for small animals and birds. The Egyptians today still use the various parts of the palm tree for the same purposes. There were many different kinds of fish in the Nile and its canals which made good food, and fishing was also popular as a sport. One method of fishing can be seen here, where a net is stretched between two boats, and the fisherman hits the water with a stick to frighten the fish into the net. Let's see if he's been lucky today. Next are demonstrations of some industries and crafts, the first of which is brickmaking. The material used is the Nile mud, which is mixed with water and chopped straw into a thick paste. This paste is put into a wooden mould, and the bricks are then simply left to dry in the sun. As there is little heavy rain in Egypt, these mud bricks can last for centuries. The houses of the ancient Egyptians, even the palaces of the pharaohs, were constructed of sun-dried mud brick. The roof was made of split palm trunks covered with branches. The building was covered with a thick layer of mud, which acted as insulation against heat, wind, and rain. Glassmaking was introduced into Egypt after the military campaigns of Thutmose III about 1450 BC, when captive glassmakers were brought here from Syria. Glass was used for making beads, inlays, amulets and small vessels, which were formed around a core, as glass blowing was not invented until the 1st century BC. In Ptolemaic times, Alexandria became a centre of glass craftsmanship, and in the Roman period fine cameos were produced in the same city. The Egyptians are also famous for mummifying their dead. Mummification is basically dehydration, and to speed up this process, the internal organs of the body were removed and preserved separately. The body was dried out by being covered with natron salt, a form of soda found in the deserts of Egypt. The body was then cleaned and embalmed and wrapped in several layers of linen bandages. Amulets were put between the bandages to protect the mummy from harm. The whole process took 70 days. Pottery making is one of the oldest crafts in Egypt, dating back to about 6000 BC. The clay is kneaded with water and mixed with ground potsherds or chopped straw, which helps the finished pot to dry evenly without cracking. The potter forms the pot with his fingers as he kicks the wheel round with his foot. The handles are added afterwards, and the pot is dried in the sun for a while before being fired. Now for a little Egyptian magic. This scene shows the different stages in decorating a stone wall. First of all, the surface is levelled, then smoothed and polished with a piece of hard stone. Grid lines are marked in red on the prepared surface to ensure accurate enlargements of the original drawings. The artist copies the outline onto the wall, working from the sketch made by the chief artist on a small slab of stone or a piece of papyrus. Then the sculptor carves the design in relief with his mallet and chisel. Finally, the details would be painted in color to make the picture look as realistic as possible. Statues were partially carved in the quarry where the stone for them was cut. First of all, the block of stone is separated from the rock face by hammering wooden wedges into holes cut in the rock. The wedges are soaked with water, and as the wood expands, the block breaks away. After the stone has been smoothed and polished, the profile of the work is outlined on one side, and then the sculptor carves out the figure, rounding it off first on the front and then on the back. Vases were made from various kinds of stone, particularly alabaster, a soft stone which was worked into beautiful designs. After the rough piece of alabaster has been polished smooth, the inside is hollowed out with a drill with a flint or copper bit. The vase is sunk into the ground to prevent cracking during drilling. Alabaster vases were used as lamps and for storing perfumes and precious oils. The tools of the carpenter and joiner were made of copper, wood and bronze. On the left, a man is sawing a log of wood into planks. Other tools used were a hammer, chisel, an adze and a bow drill for boring holes. It was important to the pharaohs that the army was well equipped at all times. Weapons included bows and arrows, swords, battle axes and spears, as well as shields and throw sticks. The horse-drawn war chariot was introduced into Egypt by the Hyksos from Western Asia around 1700 BC. Perfumes were very popular in ancient Egypt and consisted chiefly of fragrant oils and fats. The juice is extracted from sweet-smelling flowers in a bag of heavy canvas, the ends of which are twisted in opposite directions with wooden bars. This scented extract is then mixed with oil or fat as a base. Linen made from the flax plant was used by the Egyptians for clothing and many other purposes. Bundles of flax stalks are pulled through a large wooden comb to remove the tops and leaves. The stalks are soaked in water for a few days to soften them and then beaten with a wooden mallet. They are then pulled through a smaller comb to separate the fibres from the outer woody covering, and the good fibres are picked out and spun into thread on a spindle. The fine linen thread is then woven into cloth on a loom. The earliest looms in Egypt were horizontal, and the upright loom was brought to this country by the Hyksos. Another important industry was papyrus paper making, for which the government had the monopoly. The lowest part of the stem is the best part for paper making. The outer green rind is peeled off and the white pith is sliced into thin strips which are soaked in water. After repeated soaking, the now pliable strips are placed on a piece of cloth in 2 layers, one vertical and one horizontal. The surface of the sheet thus formed is then hammered with a wooden mallet to cause the fibres of the 2 layers to stick together. The sheet is then covered with another piece of cloth and pressed between 2 heavy stones for several days. During that time it also dries out in the hot sun and the piece of paper is ready for use. Good wine was appreciated in Pharaonic times, and this scene shows the method of winemaking. Bunches of ripe grapes are taken to the vat where the grapes are trodden out, and the juice extracted is poured into large pottery jars to ferment. When this process is complete, the jars are sealed with a clay seal, which is stamped with the date and the name of the vineyard where the grapes were grown.
Half 100 tons, yeah. At first they cut it in granite like this, and then they slide it by wooden sledges, and they use the Nile River, and we found the branch of the Nile River were in different places. After that they built 2 mud ramps and put sand between. By sliding they go on the first ramp till they put it on sand like this. And as they made that balance from each side and remove sand, the objects will fall down here more and more to be stand or to be erected. After that they will remove the ramps again. Okay. This is the idea of how they stand or they erect the obelisk. About the tombs, the first was a bit underground, and they found the animals can dig that place and eat the body. For that they invented the idea of basket or coffin, and then they built tombs. The first tomb of the kings in Egypt was that one. It's called the mastaba. It's mud platform, maybe 1 or 2 steps. Most of it's building out of mud.
Okay.
But by the time of King Dusser, his architect and his prime minister, this man is Imhotep, used stones, not mud, and he found the tomb underground, the mastaba, on the first level, but he raised the mastaba on 6 levels. Still we have the first pyramid of Egypt. It's called the Step Pyramid of Saqqara. Saqqara is the place where is this pyramid located. This is the first one of Egypt and the first stone building in history, by the way. After that, the pyramid became a symbol of a divine power, became sun rays, became the stairs which held the soul of the king to reach the sky. For that, they believed in the pyramid shape is a symbol of eternity. By the time of king, it's called Snefru. Snefru is the father of Cheops. At Dahshur, one of the deserts in Egypt, they built for him this one. This one is not straight pyramid, but bent pyramid, because it was built in 2 angles, in 2 slopes, not one. And this, it was a mistake. For that, they built another one for him, but in its true shape. Oh. That is the evolution of the tombs. Bit underground, mastaba, step pyramid, bent pyramid, true pyramid. In all of Egypt, we have about 124 pyramids, but some of them nowadays are remains. They collapsed by erosion during time. The famous of them, and we can say is the great one, is Pyramid of King Cheops. Okay. We have 3 great pyramids on Giza Plateau and 6 small ones for queens. In front of them we have Sphinx. It's 1 stone, 1 part from the mountain, and the ancient Egyptian carved it on that shape. The crotchet line is a symbol of protection. Usually here is protecting a religious or a divine or a sacred place behind. For the temple, they make the head of ram, because the ram is a symbol of the god of the temple. For that we have the ram-headed avenue, but the body was lion, not ram. Here we talk about a king's tomb, is King Khephren. For that they made the head of the king. The ancient Egyptian called that shape or that place, usually Bir-Hur, which means in their language the place of Horus or the house of Horus, which became after that in Egyptian language or Arabic language is Abul Hol. But Sphinx, which we use, this is a Greek name. When Greeks came by Alexander, Ptolemy, till the time of Cleopatra, they called the statue Sphinx, which means human and animal. We talk about more than 100 pyramids in Egypt, but after that, the kings invented, or the architects of the kings invented another kind of tomb, is the Valley of Kings. Instead of building pyramid, they cut the tombs among the mountains in different rooms or chambers, like Tutankhamun, as example, is located at Luxor. Okay, this is the Great Pyramid of Egypt, Pyramid of King Cheops. Its diameter about 1 kilometer, the height 147 meters, the original height, more than 2 million stones. The smallest one of the stones weighed 1 ton. How they built it up before many thousand years ago. Till now we discovered 3 things. The first, the Nile River had different branches. One of them was close to the place. They used the River Nile. The second is this tool, wooden sledge. They slide their heavy stones, and we found it in different places. The third thing, but not in the pyramid, but actually at Karnak temple, one of its pylons was built in this way. According to scaffold made out of mud ramp or sand ramp to go through and hide the building. The scientists say maybe the ancient Egyptians used the same idea when they built the pyramid, but the pyramid is so big, it's bigger and higher than the temple itself. For that, maybe the ramp was ascending against one side, maybe it was a spiral, as we see. Maybe both of them were used in like that one. Here are different theories about the constructing the pyramid according to what we found, okay? But we are not sure exactly which ones they use. Over here you can see one of the scenes in an Egyptian tomb. As you see here is a huge statue on wooden sledge. The workers here by their ropes to slide it, but here is very important. Here is mixture of oils to be, or we can say to fasten the sledge and go fast. And over here we discovered also pyramid harbor. That means the River Nile or the branch of the River Nile was close to the place, and they use it kind of transporting, especially about 4 and 5 or 5 months in a year. This during the flood of the Nile River. Also, we found some of their geometrical problems and some, we can say, mathematical papyri, as we see. This is model of their sledge. The main mason of the pyramid is limestone, this kind, and this one is located in Giza Mountains and also Cairo Mountains. They got the stone near to the place. But granite, they use River Nile to get it from Aswan, as we talked about the obelisk before. These are models of some of their tools, and the pictures here we can say are from some documentaries. Some movies try to simulate the act of the ancient Egyptian and their technique to use the tools in cutting, drilling, and also building, as we see. This is about the museum here. Now we can talk also about the mummification in ancient Egypt. By the way, if you look at on left side, you can see the 3 pyramids of Giza or Cairo, the small ones of Queens, the 10th pyramid, if you remember, one of the collapsed pyramid, one of the step pyramids, but the first of them of Saqqara, and before all of that was the mastaba, and before the history was small pit or grave underground like this.
This is not a real mummy.
Yes, it's just a model. No, it's a model.
It's a model.
Over there it is here. That is the real. Okay, since the first way in ancient Egypt, as we said, it was a bit underground, but the body on fetus shape. They believed in life after death. For that they put the body in this. Also they put their belongings around, as we see. Most of the bodies, maybe the animals dig the place and swallow or eat it. Also they were rotten by the time. but some of them are still preserved because of nature. Here we talk about hot desert and also salted desert. Salt and heat together and dry place makes a natural dehydration. In this way the body becomes fossil. Here we talk about a natural mummy. But as the Egyptians scare from the animals who can reach the body, for that, as we said before, they invented the baskets or sarcophagus, and also they built the tombs. In this way they think about how they can keep the body out of decomposing. And that way to keep the body is known as embalming or mummification. It was about 70 days. It was for high and middle class who can pay for that process because it was expensive. But by the way, by the time till 400 AD, the embalmers or the priests who did the mummification invented different ways, or we can say different qualities according to how you can pay. Here we'll talk about the standard one for the kings. The first step is extracting the inner organs, because the first part of the body will decay are the inner organs. They took the brain in this way. By hooks through nose, they reach the brain, they mash it till to be like liquid and get it out. Then they took the eye and cut incision in the left side to remove liver, lungs, okay, stomach, intestines, heart. These were removed, were mummified separately, and were kept in 4 jars are known as canopic jars. Each one is a symbol of God who can protect them. But the heart was mummified but was remained inside. In their belief it will be the center of soul, which they imagine it like this. Also there is a final judgment for anyone who would be asked by God, and he would deny any sin he did during his life. For that they will weigh his heart against the feather of truth or justice. The truth of human is in his heart, for that they kept the heart inside. This about the first step. Now we can move to see the second one. By the way, the second one is the main idea of mummification. And we can say that maybe the Egyptians discovered the phenomena of dehydration by salt. For that they use natural salt. That salt is a natural salt, is existed in the western desert of Egypt. But by that salt they dry the body. They absorb more than 70% of weight. And after 40 till 70 days, they make the bodies more bones and skin like this one. For that, this is the main idea of the ancient Egyptian mummification process, is dehydration the body by salt, or especially natural salt. But after that, they mix it resin and honey and put it on the skin to make skin stuck to bones, to make like waterproof, to prevent bacteria, micro from affecting the body. But before that, they used bags of linen full of some materials such as henna, myrrh, cinnamon, cassia, these to be in a state of the organs inside the abdomen, and also to protect it out of micro. But how they mixed the materials, what about the percentage or the amount of each one, we are not sure till now. Over here you can see some of these materials. This is natron salt, okay, and here is resin, honey and its wax, some kind of oils and waxes, but here also we have myrrh, cinnamon, cassia, also henna. We found all of that. Over here is the last step. As we see, they put the organs in the jars and they wrap the body, and while they are doing this, they put something like this. Here are not jewelry, but we can say amulets. Here are symbols of life, protection, the eye of God, okay, to give him the eternity, the scarab to give him rebirth, something of wishes of luck and safe out of harm devil. For that also we found some mummies like kings, as example Tutankhamun. We found gold on fingers and toes, where in their belief evil spirits could harm the body or go through nails. For that they put it gold. That cross hand is usually for kings, because the king in their belief during his life is a symbol of Horus, the falcon god, the god of the land. When he died, he will be Osiris, the Lord of Resurrection in the second world. The coffins are different. We have granite sarcophagus, we have stone, we have sandstone, we have wood with gold, and also we have pure gold, like Tutankhamun. We have one of his coffins weighs 110 kilograms of gold. Inside it was a mummy of the king, and the mummy has funerary mask about 11 kilograms of gold. This is the mummy of the king, still in his tomb at Luxor. And these other kings and queens' mummies, they are located now in Civilization Museum in Cairo. Some people, as you say, they couldn't pay for all of that. For that, they skipped some materials, they skipped some steps, like the time of natron, or in the state of natron, they used hot sand just to dry or get absorbing of some water from the body. Then they make plaster and cartonnage and make a mummy portrait like these ones. That one is still in Egypt till 400 AD. Okay, even the people were not Egyptian like all the Greeks and all the Romans who lived in Egypt at that time. They were mummified and were buried in Egyptian tombs like these ones. Some animals and some birds, some of them were symbols of gods. They lived in temples. When they died, the priests mummified, and others were bluffed pits. Some people, when his animal died, as he loved it, he used to mummify it. About medicine, we found some medical papyri in different places. We found cases of pains and illnesses, some injuries also, and the doctor talked about his diagnosis and also his treatment. Some of them talk about treating of fractures, and they mention this way. With sticks, linen, and glue, they make a cast or a splint, which till now we use in our daily life. According to studies of some mummies, we found false teeth were fixed before by a golden wire, like bracelets nowadays. We found this one before 3,000 years ago. The doctor of ancient Egypt succeeded in doing first prosthetics in history. Okay, as you see here, artificial toes to be fixed in the state of lost one for a daughter of one of the high priests in ancient Egypt. Okay, this about the museum here. If you like to have pictures or something, I hope you enjoyed the tour and thank you for this.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.